Welcome to part 5 in our story from Mu. In this section, we're going to learn Sacred One's perspective, what decisions he had to make in order to help preserve the sense of kindness and peace within people. And in his native tongue, the name Sacred One meant one who works to balance the human and the divine. The sun was about to set when SunWalker's group came upon a magnificent waterfall. They stood in its midst and splashed each other in the pools below the falls. In his heart, SunWalker knew that this was the perfect place to seek Sacred One on an inner journey. After bathing with others, he climbed the rocks near the waterfall and found a quiet alcove facing the east. After settling himself and relaxing his mind and wearing muscles, he breathed in deeply and with the outward breath made the sound of wind going through an ancient canyon. He did this 3 times, each time placing his awareness in the center of the wind. He then allowed a beam of light from his heart to become a spoke of a giant wheel of light. As he traveled through the beam of light to the hub of the wheel, his energy molecules became lighter and lighter until he was in the center of the hub, the place where all souls meet and are one. Sacred One, he barely whispered in his thoughts, since this is a realm where thoughts are not as focused as in the human realm. I am here with you, replied Sacred One. I know your request, and I will show you my life choices based on what those before me had done. Allow yourself to merge with me and see through my eyes. SunWalker found himself stepping into Sacred One's light form and then traveling back in time with him. As you see, Sacred One continued, when I was a boy, I was trained by my elders. They showed me how human beings had evolved on this planet. Those in the realm of non-form wanted to increase the awareness of those in form. They started by giving humans ideas of how to better their lives and rules by which to live in peace and harmony with all around them. When inspiration or new ideas came into a human's mind, the human saw it as something separate because it was different from how things were done before. There always seemed to be a tug of war between those who wanted change and those who wanted to keep things the way they had been. The tug of war was often between those who had power and those who wanted to bring equality. To convince the ones who wanted things to remain the same, the newer thinkers had to create or show increased benefit for changing things. Unfortunately, they found that the best way to do this was to show how a human being's sensations would be satisfied to a greater degree. The sensation of safety, enjoyment, food, sex, power, greater knowing, greater skills. The indulgence in physical sensation eventually made many humans addicted to sensation. Once their brain had recorded a new sensation and liked it, they wanted it again and again, and then better and better, or greater and greater. Focusing on sensation is what led many humans away from we-ness, or what is best for the whole, and toward me-ness, or what is best for me. So when one did not get what one wanted, one began to blame you or something outside oneself for all that was wrong in their life. Before that time, groups of humans had learned to think in terms of we rather than me. They truly enjoyed what was best for the greater whole, rather than just focusing on their own personal satisfaction. The most ancient ones actually focused on looking through the Creator's way of seeing life. Thus, they saw how everything is connected and could communicate with all aspects of life, since they communicated with the creative spirit, which is in all aspects of life. Sacred One continued, to help humans return to the ancient sacred ways, the non-form beings needed to send inspired leaders, now and then, to bring humans back to center, back to thinking of how one's actions affect the whole. The inspired or spiritual leaders had to make rules and then had to try to follow those rules the best they could. For example, spiritual leaders were trying to undo the human lust for taking sexual pleasure whenever one wanted to, even if it hurt another human being. One spiritual leader shared how a sacred one could rise above the desire for human sex. And soon humans challenged their spiritual leaders to prove it themselves and to not have sex themselves. Schools were formed to try to train people to return their consciousness to spiritual ways, and the sacred ones or teachers were expected to be free of human desires. But the dilemma which occurred was that those with a more enlightened awareness could not mate, and thus enlightened children were not being born. Those who had the most offspring seemed to be those who were the most aggressive and who refused to follow or listen to spiritual ways. Thus, more and more aggressive humans were being reproduced, and less spiritually enlightened beings were coming forth. Whatever the children saw their parents do, they did also. So aggressive parents were creating aggressive children. One sacred brotherhood decided to try to correct the situation by secretly seeding women who had proven to be spiritually advanced. By doing so, enlightened beings would not completely die out from the population. With less and less spiritual teachers available, there were very few left to pass on the teachings and keep the balance. As you see, Sacred One said, when I was older, I questioned my elders and asked why they could not just let go of the rule that spiritual teachers had to live without sex. Why did they not allow spiritual leaders to be examples of responsible sexual behavior? The elder replied that to change a rule would mean that the rule was wrong in the first place. At least that's the way he saw it. Thus, people would begin to question every rule that had been made. Then the people might also begin to question the teachers of the spiritual leaders and their schools, and even get rid of them. The community gave them donations so they did not have to work, but spent all their time in spiritual prayer, studies, or teaching others. So you see, pride and the fear of loss perpetuated the lie. I also had become accustomed to that lifestyle of the brotherhood and did not want to give it up, nor did I want to destroy it for the brotherhood. I could see the good we were doing in keeping the balance and creating a sanctuary for advanced beings, peaceful ones. But I never liked the lie of deception that I knew about and would one day have to participate in. For a week before Kimayo's becoming a woman's ceremony, I struggled within my conscience. When it came time for the father to step forward in the ceremony, I knew I should be the one, not you, SunWalker. I had come to honor you in sparkling water and many stars, and did not want to perpetuate the lie that had been hidden for centuries by the sacred order to which I belonged. My mind kept wrestling. with the possibility that everyone would abandon all the teachings I had been doing, which I knew would help humanity return to goodness, kindness, and balance. How would people forgive me for the secret way women had been seeded? That is why I could not become centered enough to understand what the spirit of the mountain was trying to tell me. My mind was filled with so much emotion and fear of rejection that I could not see or hear anything else. I could not even see that by staying in the cave I would not only cause my death, but that of sparkling water as well. What would you have done, SunWalker? SunWalker could feel all the inner turmoil, all the guilt, and yet wisdom that Sacred One had been sharing with the people. He had watched how many had turned their lives around and their hearts around to goodness and balance because of Sacred One's teachings. He also saw how Sacred One had disobeyed the Brotherhood's vow of keeping the mysteries to themselves. Sacred One was teaching the people who had followed him to the island all the ancient teachings which only the sacred brotherhoods were allowed to know before. SunWalker could also see how telling the truth about how women had been seeded for centuries might have destroyed the sacred order, the schools, and even the teachings, since the people would feel betrayed and thus begin to doubt all they had been taught. Perhaps even aggressive ones would have taken over the world and wiped out the gentle ones. What a choice, SunWalker realized. What would he do now, he finally realized. Now is the only moment there is. What happened is in the past. What decisions would he make for the future? So SunWalker began. I guess I can only tell you what I feel that I need to do now. I will continue to listen to the sacred feathers and the ancient ones for the teaching of how we can return to the natural balance and harmony with all of life. I will no longer use the term Sacred One, nor have a brotherhood where only a few learn the sacred ways. Instead, I will be an example of responsible action. I will show people how their every thought, word, and action creates a reaction, and thus they need to be responsible for how they affect others and the world around them. I will tell them, continued SunWalker, that an immature being thinks only of me, whereas mature beings think and see in the terms of we. Only immature beings blame something or someone outside themselves, whereas mature beings look to see how they themselves might be part of the responsibility for what is happening. Well done, SunWalker, responded Sacred One. You are indeed a good leader, and Kimayo will assist you in all that you have to give. If you have learned all this from my life, then I have done the job I came here to do. You have also uncovered the meaning of Kimayo's name, the key to how humanity strayed away from the Creator was when humanity developed the concept of my and you. In other words, instead of seeing in terms of how we can serve each other by allowing the goodness of the Creator to work through us, humans invented possessiveness and began referring to things as my home, my mate, my talents, and so forth. They also invented the scapegoat of you, or you made me weak, unhappy, and so forth. The name Kimayu is the key to how to bring the people back to harmony and balance with all of life, concluded Sacred One. The key is to notice when you are looking through the perspective of my, as in my possessions, or you, as in you are the problem. Now SunWalker understood why Sacred One had urged him to call his daughter Kimayu. SunWalker knew that the peace he now felt towards Sacred One was because he had gained the lessons Sacred One had come to teach him. I will share the mysteries of the sacred school with all the people, SunWalker said to Sacred One, as he watched his friend and father merge into the golden light. The people will act more wisely if they learn how to quiet the mind and go within, as you taught us. Thank you for teaching us how to do this, Father. As Sacred One merged with the light, SunWalker saw a vision of his friends that he had made on the beach. Hummingbird, he sighed as he opened his eyes and felt the mist of the waterfall against his skin. I have not forgotten you, my soul's delight. I will send Hawk to bring you and our friends on this journey east to our new homeland. After stretching his legs, SunWalker climbed down the rocks and joined the group for a feast that Laughing Wolf was preparing from his hunt. After the meal, SunWalker asked Hawk to return to their community of friends on the beach and lead them here to join this group. Hawk was glad to return to get his wife or mate, Moonbeam, and their other friends. He packed some supplies and began his journey. He was careful, of course, to take a different route in hopes of confusing anyone tracking them. This brings us to Hummingbird. She is part of the beach community and the mate of SunWalker. In her native tongue, her name means one who humbly serves the greater good. As the ocean waves created a mist against Hummingbird's face, she sensed SunWalker's presence and knew that he would be sending for their group of friends. She told Moonbeam, her sister, "It feels like we're going to take a long journey." Then suddenly, a wave of nausea filled Hummingbird's throat, and before she could stop herself, she vomited over the cliff. Moonbeam, her sister, commented, "That is 3 mornings in a row now that you've been sick. I sense my sister is with child." "I hope he likes adventure," Hummingbird smiled, "because it may be many moons before we settle down from this journey." "You already know it's a boy?" Moonbeam questioned. "Yes, a crow and a wolf in my dreams told me so," answered Hummingbird. "He is to protect something very sacred from the misuse of power. That is all I know for now. Time will tell. Let's go gather things for our journey so that when Hawk arrives, we can leave right away." "How do you know that it is Hawk who is coming?" Moonbeam asked. She had sensed that herself, but wondered if it was wishful thinking, since she greatly missed her mate and wanted him home soon. "The same way you knew," Hummingbird giggled as she tickled her sister and then ran back to their community of friends. Hummingbird would be glad when she could tell SunWalker that their son was on the way. Moonbeam followed down the cliff at a slower pace. She was sending prayers for a safe journey to her husband. A hawk screeched in the distance and made her smile. "Good day to you too," she sighed. "Take care of my husband." As Hummingbird began gathering tools and supplies, memories of her childhood came forth. She and her family had been part of the group which followed Sacred One to the island. He had told the few which he had gathered that some of the patterns of the old way needed to change in order for people to heal themselves from all the chaos that was beginning to happen. "I will teach you the ancient ways that only the Sacred Brotherhood knew before." It is time for all the people to know how to go within and listen to Maker of all things. By learning how to do this, you will know how to discern false teachings from the truth. Misguided ones will not be able to manipulate you through fear. You will learn how to trust the Creator above all else. Hummingbird remembered how some people on the main island were beginning to hoard wealth and possessions unto themselves, rather than sharing with the community as they had done before. They then bought and trained guards to protect themselves and carry out their selfish desires. Those who protested were eliminated. These aggressive ones were misusing the items of the sacred ceremonies, such as the sacred drink and the sacred leaves, which were smoked during vision quests. Sacred One told them that since addiction to sensation had taken over the majority of minds on the mainland, only a few were ready to gain the teachings that would help humanity progress in a positive way. Every person and family who he secretly asked to go with him agreed wholeheartedly to do so. They knew that what Sacred One said was true and feared for their children, because whenever an aggressive one had too much of the ceremonial drink, they would either rape, kill, steal, or destroy something. And so we end part 5, where we've learned Sacred One's perspective and why he struggled with decisions that he thought would help the people. Then we learned how Kimayo's name shares the key of how the human concept of my and you began to separate the people away from working harmoniously together through an understanding of we and how we're all connected. As well, we had an introduction to Hummingbird, a gentlewoman from the beach community who is the mate of SunWalker in this new land. Upcoming in part 6, we will learn about special abilities that Hummingbird, Hawk, and Steady Turtle had, and how they outwit Raven, who is aggressively pursuing them to steal the sacred feathers. And as before, thank you for leaving positive comments below. And also thank you for those who send a link of this series onto their friends. Blessings and peace and namaste. You are loved.